Welcome to Talking Giants, presented by SeatGeek. I'm your host, Bob Skinner, here with my co-host, Justin Pennick, and we're doing our wide receiver preview for the 2022 NFL Draft Class, which is fun. Justin, but we're going to get into the receivers in a minute here, but doing the receivers is tough because it's like you can't really hit the top 15 and be set. Like, I get so deep, and this is an every year occurrence, and this year lacks like that alpha like dog. And then like you had a year like last year where you had essentially three alpha dogs with Chase Waddle and Devontae Smith, and it was the first time three receivers were in the top 10. But it's like, man, we're gonna be talking about guys who might go in the 6th round, and it's like I feel like this guy can come in and contribute like year 1, year 2.
Hey, Bobby, listening to some draft podcasts this draft season, and there are some people that are making the point of wide receiver may become almost like the new running back, where they can be taken kind of whenever and kind of come in and be okay with you. Now, wide receiver definitely is a little bit more valuable than running back, and there's teams where you're going to take wide receivers round 1 and you're going to feel really, really good about that, but also you're going to take wide receivers, like you said, rounds 4 and 5 and look at their athletic profile and even look at some of their production that they had in college and be like, hey, why not? This guy can do good. And what's really happening, at least in my opinion, guys are getting more athletic, and college coaches are doing a really, really great job of viewing these athletes and how can I use this guy? And it isn't just kind of stuck to a system, stuck in their ways. There's a lot of coaches that are doing good jobs with that. And I'm excited to look at the guys that we're going to be breaking down today, but there's also a crap ton of guys that we're not going to be talking about that are really, really good too.
And it's a position where you can be successful in different types of ways. Like, okay, you got your slot guys, you got your outside guys, you got your possession guys, you got your burners, you got your contested. Like, there's so much variety in what to choose of. And I think with the, we're going to talk about, there's like a consensus, like top 6 or 7. We're going to talk about 3 or 4 of those. But then it's like, there's a guy from Cincinnati who I think belongs in that top conversation, who I have, as the 4th wide receiver in this entire class. And then, then you get your value guys. Hell, a guy we're not going to talk about, Justin Ross. We talked about him in our way too early 2020 draft preview. That you remember we did that? Like we talked about Justin Ross essentially over 2 years ago on this podcast. Sky Moore, someone that we're not going to talk about because it's like we just can't hit every single guy. So nope. It's a very fun class, and some very fun people that are part of a class of society that is just way above the rest. Is Brian Handy. He's a handyman. He likes the handies. And then we got Gregory Stafe Vader, Darth Vader's cousin. There's actually no relation there. Justin, who are these people?
If you want a handy, go to patreon.com/talkinggiants. You may get one on the same day. If you get one on the same day, there may be a correlation to signing up to be a Patreon member, but I don't know. Patreon.com.
Show this to your significant other and be like, all right, I just signed up for Patreon now. Let's do this.
All right, I just made a really smart decision for only $2 a month.
Yeah, might
do this.
It might be considered prostitution, but I mean, you get a hand for $2 a month, or just $2. Are
you saying that you'll give?
No, you show it to your significant other. All right, we're gonna talk about these wide receivers in a second, but we're gonna talk about another wide receiver, Kadarius Toney, at the start on something that should have just died off after one day, and it is not, because Kadarius Toney's trainer won't shut up. His name is Steph Brown, right?
Well, you called him Steve, so.
Yeah, that was a little too disrespectful. I looking back there, I was like, that was a little too disrespectful. I hate doing this at the beginning of a draft pod, but it's kind of like a in the mud of talking Giants.
Hey, well, this is the point of the beginning part of the show. Before we get to the draft previews, we talk about news, and this is newsworthy. We were called out by Kadarius Toney's coach, and the entire world fought back against him.
Yeah, talking Giants, first of all, we had the world on our side for this. Well, first, Wes Steinberg, the fake parody account, obviously had the tweet saying like, oh, he skipped the meetings to go to a party. And then his trainer posts the most bizarre video of them training like in the woods, essentially, with a jugs machine. Like literally in a backyard where it's like Tony's not even running routes. She's like, I kind of can understand the drill, because it's like, okay, he's at the stem of his route, ball's being ready for the ball. But also, you could spin it to like, all right, you don't even have enough room in this backyard to run routes because there's trees. Like, there's just a forest you're right in front of. It's like, okay, whatever. You got fooled by Wes Steinberg, not the worst thing in the world. And then you put out a clip of us talking about him on last Tuesday's podcast where our criticism was very light of just being, and in the video said, don't be outraged about this, but don't ignore all the signs with Tony.
Yeah.
And his train, and I still like Tony. Like, the reason I'm not going hard is because I do like Tony. Was Coach Steph, but what's annoying is two grown men speaking on another grown man about what he does to make a living. When neither one of you have been in a meeting, practice, weight room, or training session with him. He's more than fine. He's working hard. When the time comes, he'll be ready. I actually didn't see this for a while, and then I quote tweeted it. Was like, all right, am I going to be mad about this or joke? I'm like, yeah, let me joke. And I said, what's annoying is a grown man speaking on another grown man about what he does to make a living, when you haven't been in a podcast studio, my office, or Charlotte, North Carolina, which I'm sure the North Carolina thing threw him off. We're more than fine. We're working hard, and I don't need the time to come because I'm always ready. And then finish it. To be real, our support for Tony has been very loud and have said not to be outraged. This is like criticism for a small issue. Comes with the territory, Steve. Which is where I might have been a little too disrespectful.
Yeah. You were fine until you called him Steve.
His trainer's not doing him any favors. Like,
no.
You're making it work. Like, we talked about it. We said it's a very light issue. It's a small thing. Don't be outraged about it. We had moved on after the next day. Like, it's not a big deal. It's one of those things that gets talked about, maybe a little more than it deserves to be because it's in the off season. There's nothing going on. And then he just won't shut up. He won't shut up, dude. It's like, let it go away. Like, anyways,
and the more that he talks about Kadarius Toney not being there, the more people are going to talk about Kadarius Toney not being there. That's the thing. Where if he just lets it go, then okay, Kadarius Toney doesn't show up till day one of voluntary workouts. We're going to talk about it, but then we'll stop talking about it. But he keeps talking about it, so then everyone else will keep talking about it. Just
was all-time funny. I was like, are you serious right now?
And usually...
I was surprised as he called us grown men. I thought he'd take like some pot shots and be like, these two freaking bloggers, or
I appreciate that.
The typical stuff.
Because, people call me a child all the time, so I appreciate being called a grown man. But it was funny how he was saying how we were critiquing him at his livelihood, even though we're not there, but he was doing the same thing to us. So I found that was ironic, but I don't even care. Like,
it doesn't. I was more laughing. It's just like, you realize you're hurting yourself right now.
Yeah,
Dopey.
And shout out to our TG community for. I mean, just every single reply was like, you don't know what you're doing with the you don't want to be against, and it's not even like we're not against Tony. We're not really against
Tony. We make his shirts. We made an award after him. Yeah. I love his personality. I look forward to his. I like Tony. I'm just not going to be. I'm not, because the fact that I like him is not going to lead me to be ignorant and ignore everything.
It was a life comes full circle moment. Coach of Kadarius Toney comes at the media, who created the Media Some Clown shirt in support of Kadarius Toney. It was like life comes full circle.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. All right, well, let's talk about some wide receivers and guys who are going to be gunning possibly for Kadarius Toney's catches, yards, and touchdowns. Go ahead.
But I have a question first, and it's with Giants stuff, and then we can get to maybe specific wide receivers. Is there a specific kind of wide receiver that you are looking for the Giants to pick up during this draft process and during this draft? Or are you right now like, hey, Giants are probably going to draft the wide receiver second round after, third, fourth, fifth round, and I don't really care what kind of player they get, but if they just get a good wide receiver, where are you on that?
I would definitely like just a good wide receiver, but if we're talking types, I would like that outside X receiver. Shep is still here. Toney is not limited to the slot, but he can run he can be essentially just our slot receiver once Shepard's gone, even though you're going to always put Toney outside as well. You got Galladay. I think it'd be nice to have that separate X receiver, because guess what? Teams shaded safeties over the top to Galladay all year long, and it stopped the Giants from attacking deep downfield, and not because those just now that's halfway Jason Garrett, but also it's like, you can have it. We saw Slayton beginning of the season be like, okay, you have the safety shaded over the top, and then Slayton kind of fell off. Like, we always said Galladay helped Slayton more than any player on the team not named Daniel Jones, which looked to be really true through the first month of the season.
But I'm looking for a more balanced 2019 Darius Slayton kind of receiver. That is exactly what I'm looking for. There's some contested catch guys in this class. You can argue that Pickens is like Kenny Golladay 2.0. There's a lot of slot guys that it's like, well, you have the same kind of similar skill set to Kadarius Toney, so is that redundant or not? I don't know, but a more well-rounded Darius Slayton 2019 version, that is the kind of receiver that I'm looking for. And some of these guys like Watson, Alec Pierce, I feel like they fit that perfectly. And we're going to talk about some specific guys right now, but I wanted to get your take on that, and I'm in lockstep with you.
Right. All right, let's start it off at the top with these aren't my rankings. Maybe I can do a quick rundown of the rankings of players I have. But it's just kind of like the guys who have the most buzz going into it and might be like consensus ranking wise. And I think the top guy out of the guys we're going to talk about Burks, Jameson Williams, Christian Watson, Jahan Dawson, Alec Pierce, George Pickens, Calvin Austin, Khalil, Shakir, Bill Melton, Velus, Jones Jr. You know, spread it out throughout the draft, not just hitting top, not going top heavy with this episode. I think the top guy that the consensus is on is Treylon Burks, the wide receiver out of Arkansas, even though you could see him slipping into the second round. He's a very unique player. People have compared him to A.J. Brown, a little bit of Debo Samuel. I do see the A.J. Brown comparisons. He's 6'2", 225 pounds, a big wide receiver like A.J. Brown. His testing wasn't good. He ran a 4.55 40, a 33-inch vertical jump, but he does look faster on the field. Doesn't look like a burner, but you know, he had a contested catch versus Alabama and then outran their entire defense. This past year for Arkansas, he had 66 catches, 1,100 yards, 11 touchdowns. He's a big wide receiver who lines up all over the field, slot, outside. They line up in the backfield, but he did mostly work from the slot 77% of the time. His long speed is good, but I think his acceleration is a little bit inconsistent. But he's big and he knows how to use that strength. Like versus press, he can release right through you, even though he didn't face a ton of it. He moves through guys and he never gets caught up with those press receivers, which is there's some guys that I like. But it's like, man, when they get pressed up, there's a little bit to be worried about.
And that's a common theme throughout the entire draft class, Bobby, is, okay, yeah, this guy's fast. He's got game-breaking speed, blah, blah, blah. But even some of the bigger physical guys, well, they get locked up in press. How are they going to do with more physical corners? How are they going to do with more physical corners? And I felt like I was just deja vu with every single, you look at some scouting reports just to confirm what what we're seeing. Treylon Burks does not have that issue of being out physical or being, losing that battle at the line of scrimmage due to press.
Yeah, and he's really strong through contact, and he gets a lot of yak, and he gets, like in different types of ways. He's got a nasty stiff arm where he just throws people off his body. You put him in back shoulder contested catch situations, he's got just great body control for him. He's a good leaper and really knows how to high point the ball. I think he gets in and out of his routes quickly, but he does struggle to separate it at the, before the stem, which means like he's got good breaks on it, but like that release, sometimes he's got build up speed. And I do think there's at times versus man coverage, he just really struggles to separate, but also he does the contested catch stuff. And then you put him in the slot and let him be that big slot. So there's ways to work around that. And I think his route tree is pretty limited. You watch him versus Alabama, like he dominated that game. Like he had a dominant performance. And the last note I have on him is, and I don't say this without just like really seeing it, he has really bad blocking effort and bad body language at times. And again, if I can't get a read on your blocking, like I just don't put a note on there. And if you're a good blocker, I put on it. But he has really bad blocking effort and bad body language at times. Yeah.
He's a freak. I mean, Treylon Burks is just a freak of a football player. He's a freak of an athlete. So what I love to really compare sometimes is, well, is your production scheme related, or is it simply, are you just a really good football player? Can you dominate? And Treylon Burks was definitely both, where the scheme at Arkansas and the quarterback play wasn't the best, but he did, kind of utilize the scheme plays of, hey, we're just scheming the ball to you here. But his individual effort also did a lot of his talking in his production too. He was 9th in the nation in screen yards, 4th in the nation in yards after the catch per reception, and his average depth of target was less than 10. He accounted for 37% of Arkansas's receiving yards over the last 2 seasons. 37% of receiving yards over the last 2 seasons. 82.9% of career snaps have either come from the slot, in line, or backfield in this heavy Arkansas RPO scheme. And him being used like in the backfield as well, kind of used as like a bigger, more physical Debo Samuel, which there's a decent amount of guys in this draft class who, they're adding that skill set to their part of that game where they're lining up in the backfield, they're getting sweeps, and guys are doing more and more of that. So I really like Treylon Burks, Bobby. He is on the list right now. It's still relatively short, but he is on the short list of guys that if he's there at 36, slamming the fist at the table, possibly, and picking him up. And he definitely should not be there at 36, though. This Treylon Burks should be a first-round pick.
Do you think so? I'm not as high on him as everybody else, and there's a lot of projecting with him. But I have 5 guys ahead of him. And I know it's a very unique play style, and that might be the hang-up I'm having on him. But there may not be any wide receiver that goes in the top 10, and I just see other guys that are better to me. I like the next guy we're going to talk about a little more. I like Olave more. I like both the Ohio State guys more. I like London more. I like Alex Pierce out of Cincinnati more. Alex Pierce I've kind of fallen in love with over the last couple of days watching him. When I was watching Ritter and then went and broke down his film individually. But with this, because we had that conversation at the top, these guys are all so different, they do different things. You can make the argument for wide receiver 1, and me not having him there, I'm not going to be you're wrong. Whereas if we're talking about the edge class and it's a Trayvon Walker conversation, it's I feel comfortable saying you're wrong. Or if we're talking about the tackles and his cross, I feel with Burks, if you tell me he's the guy who I don't have as in the top 5 wide receivers, believe it or not, but if you told me he's your wide receiver 1, I'm not blinking at that.
Again, it's a combination of how are you used in scheme, and then what are you able to do outside of scheme too? And Arkansas using him as both their intermediate option with the screen game, where he's not the fastest guy in the world, he's not the quickest guy in the world, but still productive in that sense, and also maybe not using him enough in those contested catch situations. Now, I thought that was curious that PFF only had 7 contested catches from him this year. I'm pretty sure there was 2 or 3 in that Alabama game alone where it was contested catches, back shoulder catches. So not sure what they're measuring there as usual, but Arkansas used him in different ways than maybe he's going to be used in the NFL. I don't know if that made any sense what I just said.
No, it does. It's gonna be different, and there's a lot of projecting with this player, which I guess is sometimes what some things I have struggles with. It's how do I project this guy to the NFL? Because it's not just place him in, a lot of these wide receivers, you just place him in, you line him up. Tony was actually in this conversation last year, where it's I didn't have Tony as my 4th receiver after those 3 guys, and he ended up being the 4th receiver. But it's you're not mad at it. It's because Tony can do things that other guys can't do that you had ahead of him, and I think Treylon Burks falls in that category. The same
category, yeah, absolutely.
Where it's you understand it, you it may have not been the pick that you made, but you understand it. So again. Do I think when you're comparing to every other position and every other player and then the other wide receivers, do I think if I did a mock and it was just by what I do, would I put him in the first? Probably not. Probably be early second. But if a team picks him 12th or 13th, I don't think you flinch at that either.
No. Leo Chanel or Treylon Burks?
Burks. There's there's linebackers that you like.
You could say the same thing about wide receiver.
I know, but wide receiver is going to bring more impact to inside linebacker. I would probably go Burks.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think there's a better argument for there's more linebackers that you like in the draft. Fits better with the linebacker than wide receiver because Burks is more of that physical freak.
Yeah. I agree with that. I would go Burks. And in my mock draft, I took a wide receiver who I guess we could talk about him next instead of we can go a little out of order since the guy who I took with the round 2 pick 36 in my draft month mock draft, and that's Christian Watson, wide receiver out of North Dakota State. Now this is a guy that you're going to have to project a lot because he played against horrible competition. He was fast and everyone, but he's 6'4", 208 pounds, 32.5-inch arms. Shows up to the combine, runs a 4.36, 38.5-inch vertical jump. This past year, 4th in North Dakota State, he put up 800 yards, 7 touchdowns on 18.3 yards per catch, but also had some rushing yards too. He's a big wide receiver with great speed, and he accelerates quickly. Like that 4.36 isn't just a long strider who does the test well in the 40 time, my man. That speed shows up, and he's going to be a constant deep threat. He's going to be a constant deep threat. He's physical versus jam corners. If you want to go watch it, go watch him versus Senior Bowl. I mean, he literally, a corner tries to press him up, and he puts him in the dirt and gets open, and then Kenny Pickett underthrows him, but he makes the catch and turns it into like a 32-yarder. Like, he's physical. He's a great leaper, but I do think he can mistime his jumps. So that's something he needs to get back to better at, but he does contort his body well and make back shoulders and those contested catches. He's just a smooth runner, man. A smooth runner, and he gets a lot of yak, and they even use him on sweeps. You know, and again, it's against lesser competition, but you can just tell, like, this dude is flying, man. Like, you can see this happening versus Division I talent. You know, it's like, okay, well, how does he run as a route runner? I don't think he gears down too much at the stem, but I do think his breaks need to be quicker and less steppy. Like, there's just kind of 2 more steps in there, and there's times where he does stumble at coming out of his release, and I think his releases need work overall, but those are things you work on at the next level. Now, there's drop concerns. I don't have the exact numbers, but he did have like a pretty high a drop rate. You know, I didn't see in the games that I watched, but those are there, I guess, according to the numbers.
Yeah, he has more career drops than touchdowns.
Okay, that's not good.
But I mean, but a lot of other guys in this draft class also have more career drops than touchdowns too. But
yeah. In the quick games, he uses his size to box out players and slants, curls, and outs, and then obviously has the speed for those. And he's a very willing blocker, and this isn't something that I can attest to, but everyone says he's a really good teammate. All right, this is going to come as a hot take, but I have him as the wide receiver 1 in this class. I mean, that speed, size. Apparently, he's a guy that works hard, and the things that he needs to get better at is getting out of his releases better, and being less steps at the stem of the route. But he's quick in and out of them. Like, all the things you can't teach, he has.
Yeah.
And the things that he doesn't necessarily have right now, which aren't even horrible, they just need work, are the teachable things with Christian Watson. I know I just talk about projection, but I try to not fall in love with the big guys, but man, this is a big guy with speed. Like, it's impossible to not fall in love with him. Like, I really think I have him as the wide receiver 1. I like him more than Drake London. I don't think Drake London has that top speed, even though he is a good receiver, and I have him as the second guy. We're not going to talk about him. The next guy we're going to talk about, I think he's got issues to his game. Olave gets no yak. Garrett Wilson is a very sloppy player, although he's exciting. I like Watson as wide receiver 1 in this class.
Talked about things that you can't teach. Relative athletic score, 10 out of 10. One of the first players besides Jordan Davis that, we're really we didn't even talk about Jordan Davis. One of the first players that I'm really looking at that had that relative athletic score of a 10 out of 10, and Christian Watson has it. 6. Here's the thing, Bobby. You said that he's big.
Yeah, he's thin.
He's thin. I mean, he's 6'4", and that's where the size comes in and the height comes in, and that's really, really awesome. You love to see a guy that can run like that isn't 5'10", 5'11", like the Bo Meltons, Calvin Austins of the world. Those guys are really short, but but they also run fast. Christian Watson has that speed, but he also has that height.
I mean, him and London are both 6'4", and London's 11 pounds heavier.
4 touchdowns of at least 65 yards in 2021. Sweeps and carries at North Dakota State University out of the backfield. He has experience of as a kick returner as well. I have down he is another add him to the list of guys that I would consider in round 1, but you have him down as wide receiver 1, so you view him as a first round pick, correct?
Yeah, not for 5 or 7, but yeah, definitely as a first round pick.
Just in general. So this is a little bit of nitpicky, but I think it has to be asked because Joe Shane, smart, tough, dependable, those 3 things, I feel like that's actually in practice what Joe Shane does, and he kind of lives by. Nitpick compared to some of the other wide receivers in this draft class with their injuries, but multiple surgeries to repair a torn cartilage in knee from 2019. Does that fit smart, tough, dependable?
I'm not a doctor, so I can't answer that exactly, but it was in
Correct.
2019, and there's been no issue since then.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, listen, if the Giants doctors or whoever, the NFL doctors, see it as a red flag, then go for it. But
yeah,
for me, I kind of just don't dive into that stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
But I'm with you. I may not have first round grade on him, but second round, he's joining that crowd if he's there day 2. I'm excited if his name is called.
Yeah, and that's what, like, when my mock I put out, I was like, well, truly BPA over need in round 2, because it's like, you know, BPA, but like need matters. But it's like, if Watson's there, man, it'd be hard for me to pass up.
Yep.
The next guy on this list, who's a lot of people's wide receiver 1, who I'm not as high on, but I'll get, like Treylon Burks, is like, I get it, because he's fast as hell. Jameson Williams, wide receiver out of Alabama, 6'1", 179 pounds. He's pretty skinny. Had 79 catches, almost 1,600 yards, and 15 touchdowns, averaging 20 yards per catch for Alabama this year. I mean, just balled. After the 2 previous seasons at Ohio State, when he transferred, he had 15 catches over 2 seasons at Ohio State, which I do think is a little more alarming than some people are lading onto. But he does have field splitting speed with just amazing, and it gets there quick. Like his startup, his long speed is just unreal. It's not Waddle's speed, but man, it's pretty close. He gets great yak and stride, but I don't think he's actually a tackle breaker. But his speed creates just easy separation downfield versus anyone he faces, except for Sauce Gardner. Even though they didn't match up too many times. I do think he has too many drops. And I think he struggles to bring the ball in and contested spots or just readjusting, you know, because there was times where it's like he burned his guy, but Bryce Young doesn't throw a perfect ball and the corner's able to gain a little ground. He just wasn't able to readjust to those throws, which worries me a little bit because, like, you know what, you're not just going to be running past guys consistently in the NFL. You're not going to average 20 yards per catch in the NFL by just running past guys. You got to do more than that.
Yep.
When he is jammed up, his releases to me take way too long, way too long. And I do think that's a big time struggle for him. And he does this weird stop and go, like high step at the beginning of routes sometimes. I just think he needs to attack DB's hips further before breaking at that stem. I just worry that he'll struggle to uncover in the short concepts, you know. Even on slants, like, yeah, if you got a corner playing 7 yards off, you run a slant, yeah, Jameson Williams is gonna ball. He might split all of them sons of guns and go 80 yards. But if he's pressed up on a slant, I worry about him. He's a boom or bust prospect. I think out of all of these guys, if there's anyone who's like this, you can see him booming and being the best in this class, or you could see him fizzling out, and, you know, 3 years from now, he has 15 catches for, you know, his second team, and, you know, he's battling to make the roster for the Arizona Cardinals. That's Jameson Williams.
Yeah, and he tore his ACL in the national championship.
Yeah, forgot to mention that huge thing. A
guy that's centered around speed, and he tore his ACL in the national championship. So, you know, forget year one, just what is he going to look like, and, you know, when is he even going to come back? You're not drafting a guy simply just for year one, but will that second year be boom, and then what will he look like after that? You know, because I always reference the fantasy football data, and wide receivers, you know, fantasy football data can be important for evaluation. You know, your second year off the torn ACL is really good, but then do you fizzle out after that? So Jameson Williams, 4th in the nation in yards after the catch per attempt per catch, 15th in deep catches and 5th in deep yards. I really like when a guy has high yards after the catch numbers, even when their average depth of target is high, because again, that means that your individual effort, you know, is there. The wide receiver separation is going to be less, your higher average depth of target. So if your yards after the catch is still high when you're targeted deep down the field, that's a really, really good sign. 11 touchdowns of 30 plus yards was the most in the nation. And Bobby, you know, you mentioned about his time at Ohio State and his time previously. This was his first year where he had over 300 snaps. 2020, he had 308 snaps. That was the highest of his collegiate career. So this was really the first year where he boomed. And Alabama, these guys typically do boom if you're going to be getting playing time. So the talent is there, but when you tore your ACL, how are you going to recover? And your game was already predicated on speed. Tough.
Well, he tore his ACL, and he was behind the depth chart of 2 wide receivers in this class, on Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson.
Yeah.
Look, now that can also be that can be like, oh, well, that speaks well to those guys. But you know what? You know, I want more than 9 catches behind those guys. You know, like you could have given me more than 9 catches in 2020 behind those guys with Justin Fields as your quarterback. And I like Olave a lot. Wilson, I'm a little up and down on, but you see the talent there, and obviously that's going to show up in college. that means something to me. That's not just like, well, those guys are so good. Like, no, Jameson Williams, if he's the top if he's a first round wide receiver in this class, even pre ACL, you got to explain to me why he didn't get on the field at Ohio State. Like, that needs, if you're, we're not going to get that reasoning on the outside looking in. But if you are, scout GM, you need to know, why didn't he see the field at Ohio State?
Christian Watson was a nitpick with the smart, tough, dependable thing, but Jameson Williams definitely does not fall under the category of smart, tough, dependable, at least right now.
Yeah, and the ACL, but I do think he'll recover kind of well he's getting the work already. Obviously, not going to be running full speed. All right, Justin. I'm going to read the ad. Who do you want to hit after this? Alec Pierce or Jahan Dawson? I have Pierce rated higher, but Dotson is probably more rated higher consensus-wise, and we have a lot of Penn State people in the fan base. And I like Dotson, too, by the way.
Forgetting our friend George Pickens, too.
Yeah, but I got him after those cats.
Let's do Pierce.
Okay. All right, well, baseball fans, it's time to step up to the plate with DraftKings Sportsbook. An official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball, new customers get just $5 on any team to win. Or bet just $5 on any team to win and get $200 in free bets if they do. If Sportsbook isn't available in your state yet, you can still take a swing at stacks of green. That's money, people, with DraftKings daily fantasy baseball contest.
Draft.
New customers can play free for thousands in prizes with their first deposit. Pick a lineup of 2 pitchers and 8 batters while staying under the salary cap and rack up points for hits, runs, strikeouts, and more. How are the Yankees doing? I saw they went 2-1 in the first year. It looks like Stanton's balling. Are they good?
Yeah, there's some concerns in the back of your brain about, hey, can they play good defense over time? Hey, can they hit
lit up?
Can they hit with runners in scoring position? And can they put contact? Well, the problem wasn't the first series wasn't hitting the baseball. It was just, can you score with runners in scoring position? And if you're not hitting home runs, can you still score runs? So we'll see with those Yankees.
Cole got lit up too. DraftKings is safe, secure, and reliable. Best of all, you can deposit and withdraw your cash whenever you want. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code JOHNBOY. Bet just $5 and win $200 in free bets if your team wins their game. That's promo code JOHNBOY at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. 21 plus, restrictions apply. MLB trademarks used with permission. See show notes for details. All right, next on this wide receiver preview, we're going to talk about my guy. I have him as wide receiver 4 in this list. And I saw that Chris Sims had him as wide receiver 3 in this class. And I was like, I watched him when I was watching Ritter, and he did look pretty good. But it was like, is he, it's like I wasn't focusing in on him at all. And I agree with Chris Sims. And Chris Sims has Jameson Williams as wide receiver 1, so it's not just, agreeing with Chris Sims. But, like, I think there's, like, legitimacy to his ranking of him. That's Alec Pierce, wide receiver, Cincinnati, 6'3", 211 pounds, 33-inch arms. Went to the combine, balled out at that, had a 4.4 140, a 40.5-inch vertical jump. This past year for Cincinnati, had 884 yards, 8 touchdowns. Modest production a couple years before that, but was putting up production for them. And I think he has an amazing combine that pairs with what you see on tape versus top dogs. Go watch him versus Alabama and Notre Dame. I think he was held back by Desmond Ridder. I'm not a Desmond Ridder fan. I think he was held back by Desmond Ridder. Versus Notre Dame, he had like 140, 150 yards. He could have had over 200 in that game and another touchdown. But Desmond Ridder just missed him, underthrew him. Versus Alabama, he just wouldn't throw it his way. Part of that was the patch protection up front, But it's like he was burning Alabama. He was open all game. There's a touchdown where Ridder missed him. Now, he did have one drop on a slant that was really high. Which is like, you shouldn't be overthrowing a slant, but he did get his hands on it and it did drop it. But like, he won his matchups versus Alabama and Notre Dame, which was the best competition that he saw at Cincinnati. Like Sauce Gardner, like, dominated those two opponents. He seems like a wide receiver that just knows how to get open. I think he's a deep threat with his speed, and he's got good get off of the line of scrimmage. He's able to make those contested back shoulder catches. His big catch radius makes him a red zone threat. He stacks well. Like, if he beats you off over the top, he's got the speed, and he's going to stack and get in front of you and box out a DB and know how to do it. I think he's got a variety of releases, and he'll make press corners pay. He may sometimes struggle with press a little bit. I don't think it's an issue. But
he's also not 180 pounds.
Yeah, but if you make him pay, like or if you press him, he's gonna make you pay. Like you might get with it a rep or two, but he will make you pay. Now route running, I think he does gear down a lot with his and his breaks, and sometimes will stumble out of his breaks. But I do think his routes are overall ran pretty crisply, and he breaks them off flat, just not the super quick that you would like to see. I think. In the quick game, I think he runs those quick game routes very quickly with great timing. He understands zone and find the hole that sits in. And also blocking. He takes every blocking rep seriously. Like I think he's he's got the size, he's got the speed, and he does a lot of things well. He's a very well-rounded wide receiver. I think he's going to. I have him as I have Olave, London, and Watson over him.
I think he could develop into a solid, very good wide receiver too. That's what I think Alec Pierce can be, and especially because I can just visualize him on the Giants. Whereas you're not a guy that's going to get pushed around, but you're again another athletic freak where you're 6'3", 211 pounds. You're running a 40-yard dash like you're one of these Bo Melton, Calvin Austin's kind of guys. Again, Jameson Williams. Except you're big. You're an athletic freak. Had a 9.98 relative athletic score. 72.5% of catches went for either a first down or a touchdown. I have sharp breaks as part of my notes as well. Bobby, here's my question to you. Just kind of maybe reaching for a talking point, but is there a value to facing Sauce Gardner and Kobe Bryant, those two kind of corners in practices every day for a couple years?
Absolutely. Especially Sauce, man. We're going to talk about Calvin Austin later, and I watched his matchup with Sauce Gardner in 2020, and it's like, good Lord, it's like Sauce he dominates everyone who he goes against. And I know Calvin's not on the same level, but it's like he ruined stuff. He ruined stuff for them. And you just couldn't throw at Sauce Gardner. So yes, I do think that helps out a ton. Like I really do think he is going up against the best corner in this draft every single day. Yep. When you saw guys like Jameson Williams struggle with that, although it may not been very many reps. The Notre Dame Cats struggled with that. Where like Pierce, you got to learn to deal with it. You got to learn to deal with it and deal with that press. And be able to, once you get past a guy, to not just be fast, but to stack that guy and know how to box him out. Yeah, I'm not crediting all of his success to facing Sauce Gardner. But again,
but it helps.
I felt Alex Pierce was totally let down by his QB, and then when you're playing Bama, his offensive line as well.
And I think he's also perfect for Brian Daboll's system too, in a system that is full of crossing routes. I think he has a lot of experience catching footballs over the middle of the field, even if it's one of those routes where he's starting to run like it's a crossing pattern, but then he curls in the middle of the field. He has a lot of experience catching the ball over the middle of the field, which there's a lot of guys in this class where maybe it's too centered on catching it over the middle field, or it's too centered on catching balls over the sideline, catching the ball solely deep, where I feel like he's balanced in that regard in his ability to win, his ability to get open, his ability just to catch the ball overall.
He's just well-rounded. He's more well-rounded than most of the receivers in this class.
Absolutely.
He does everything. And again, this game isn't flawless, but it's like he's got the speed. You can people argue that his testing is better than his actual ability, but I don't agree with that. Like again, watch him versus if you can get all 22 tape of him versus Alabama, not just the broad. If you're watching the broadcast version, you're not going to see this. But if you can get all 22 of him versus Alabama, you're going to see him open all game and Desmond Ridder not going his way. All game. Game and Desmond Ridder not going his way. And even on the broadcast, you're going to see oh my gosh, I can't believe he missed him. I can't believe he didn't throw it to him in these situations. Yeah, I mean, I really like this guy. I have him fourth in this class. And do I feel super confident in that? No, because there is a lot of, Burks. There's a lot of these guys, but I feel I like him, and I'm willing to stick out my. I feel very confident he's going to be a really good wide receiver. And I'll stick out my neck on that at least. But right now he's projected late second, third round, which is surprising to me. I don't know why.
Let's do it. Can't get a Christian Watson, Treylon Burks, round 2. let's do it. Get
If
another.
he's there round 3, that's a bang the table pick right there.
Yeah.
All right, next on this list is a guy that we've actually kept track of for a while. Watching Pat Freiermuth last year, really, this guy just stood out. I was like, man, he's just a really good wide receiver, and I like him a lot. It's Jahan Dawson, wide receiver out of Penn State. He's 5'11", 178 pounds. Ran a 4.4 340, 36-inch vertical. He just put up production after production at Penn State this past year. 91 catches, 1,200 yards, 12 touchdowns. He played outside at Penn State, but he's got to play slot wide receiver in the NFL, and I think he's going to do that really well. Part of it is he's got good, not great speed for his size, but he is sufficient. Like, he will make big plays. You can put him over the middle of the field. He'd be a great leaper in stride, and he has his acrobatic catches. And again, I think he's a slot receiver. Doesn't mean you can't line him up at outside at times and give him some free releases. And I think his hands are great. He just makes wild plays. Like, he makes there's some one-handed catches he makes. There's these leaping plays. It just makes insane types of plays, and he really knows how to tempo his routes. Tempo his speed and vary his speed up through his routes and manipulate zone defenders really, really well. Gets in and out of his breaks smoothly. And this is the main thing of why he needs to be a slot receiver, not necessarily just the speed or the size. He gets bullied versus press. Like, he really, really struggles versus press defenders. And I don't think he's going to have that ability to stack NFL cornerbacks when he's lined up on the outside. So even when he does get a win versus press, or if a little bit of if the corner's playing off, I just don't think he's going to be able to stack those corners and be that deep threat. He's a player who reminds me of, and I hate doing this because we're Giants people. He reminds me of Sterling Shepard. He really does remind me of Sterling Shepard. And I think he's good with the ball in his hands, getting yak. And he's got a knack for being an outlet on broken plays. And his QB and his offense were horrible. Like, the Penn State QB was horrible, and their offensive line was really bad. And he was still able to put up 91 catches. So, listen, I'm not as high on him as I was, as much as I thought I would be in going into this. Like, I thought I was going to be like Jahan Dawson, first-round wide receiver, super underrated. I do think he's a second-round guy. But, I think you can plug him in the slot, and he can be a contributor day one.
You're going to fall in love with the athletes, but Jahan Dotson's not the insane athlete that some of these other guys that we have been talking about. He wins by route running, body control, and elusiveness. Those are the best parts of his games. I will say, though, between the route running, his wide catch radius, his reliability, consistency, hands, he has the potential to be a quarterback's best friend. And it's funny how you brought up Sterling Shepard. Has Sterling Shepard not been Daniel Jones's best friend with that high catch rate and reliability, go-to guy on third down? Dotson certainly has that potential to be the quarterback's best friend.
Yeah, and I think that will be how he's painted. Where will the whole NFL be just like, Jahan Dawson's that dude? No, I don't think they will. But I think fans of whatever team he's on is going to be like, this guy's extremely underrated working from the slot. If he ends up on a winner, then that will be amplified. But I think you put him in the slot. He struggles with that press corner, but again, he has that route running ability. He's got the catch radius. He's got the ability to get yak after the play. You can even throw him back as a returner if you really wanted to. I think Jahan Dawson's just a good football player. At the end of the day, he's not your prototypical X receiver, but I think he's just a good overall football player, and he's a very safe pick for a team.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And you're, like you said, QB's best friend. Like, a QB is always going to be able to trust Jahan Dawson. He's going to know where Jahan Dawson is. Dawson's timing's not going to be messed up if you're putting him in the slot, and he's just going to be a trusted player. And he was able to put up production, make big plays at Penn State, and he'll make big plays from the slot as well. He just doesn't have that burner speed or the size to really be that everyday X outside wide receiver. So, all right, next on this list is a very interesting player, a player we talked about in our way too early draft preview. And that's Georgia. This guy is defines what it means to be a dog. That's George Pickens, 6'3", 195 pounds, 32-inch arms. Ran a 4.4 740. Didn't play much this past year. He tore his ACL and spring this past season. And he's He's kind of a trouble player. Like, I have on a note with him, and I wrote this down not as a joke, and then I look back and laugh. I was like, plays with an edge to him. Literally fought Georgia Tech.
Fiery player.
Yeah, fiery player, which I love. If you could get that under control, I love those type of players. But it's like, you gotta trust it. Speed-wise, I think his long speed is pretty damn good, but his get-off is undoubtedly slow, and it even looked even slower post-ACL. My worry about George Pickens is cornerbacks I just think are just going to be able to stay in his hip at the pro level. I really think he's going to have issues, just cornerbacks in his hips. But with that, he's an amazing contested catch wide receiver. I think he's the best contested catch, when he's healthy, the best contested catch wide receiver in this class. He makes insane acrobatic catches, and his just catch radius overall is insane. He makes wild catches. Like, so it's like we're talking about a guy who was going third round, and it's like he might be the best contested catch guy in the whole damn class. But I think he's got a lot of things he can get better at, but he does need to get better. Like, his press gives him some issues, and people will account that to his frame. I just think he needs to really work on it and work on his releases. And there's times when he does win, he doesn't stack the corner. I keep on saying stack, and maybe I should explain it for people. Not everyone is stack. It's essentially getting in front of the cornerback once you beat him, where he's trailing directly behind you and not on your side. And that's what I was talking about, where the cornerbacks just stay in his hip. I think his route running is average, but he does have good bursts out of his breaks. But I think he telegraphs his routes again. There's some good stuff. There's some really good route running, but I think it's inconsistent. He telegraphs it. And then as a blocker, may not be necessarily what you call a good blocker, but he sure as hell brings intensity to it. Like, he's got some bully reps. Like, he plays with an edge to him, and I fall in love with those type of players. They're dangerous, but I do fall in love with them. And he's got, again, he can, you can claim that he has the best contested catch ability in this class.
Kenny Golladay 2.0?
What we just described as Kenny Golladay.
Yes, yes, exactly.
And I hate to compare every player to, a Giants player, but like, that scouting report is Kenny Golladay.
Yeah.
Like, guys can stay in his hip, sometimes, struggles to stack, but he's got, good long speed, but his get off is a little slow. His route running is inconsistent. There's routes where it's like great route, and there's others where like that was pretty bad. And you're telegraphing where you're going. Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to project Kenny Galladay's success, but play style, like, it's Kenny Golladay play style. Yeah.
There's also an interesting conversation when it comes to draft people about when you're going to be looking for a wide receiver. What do you look for? Do you avoid the contested catch guys? Do you target the contested catch guys? Because that's something that, you can see that they can do. You can measure. It's like, well, this is how they go up and they can get the ball and they're aggressive. So I think I'm more on the side of not avoiding the contested catch guys, but right now they're not right for the Giants. Like, the Giants don't need that guy. They may need that guy in 2 years from now, because Kenny Golladay may not be on the football team. But right now, they don't need that guy. They need that guy that can kind of take the top off with speed, and that can be a little bit more of that intermediate option. George Pickens, I don't think is that intermediate option on the outside for the Giants right now. And also smart, tough, dependable. Is he smart, tough, dependable with the torn ACL and, spitting in guys' eyes in 2019 when he has water in his mouth?
I kind of love that dog in it. But at the same time, we got to wait and see a little bit with the Shane smart, tough, dependable stuff. Because that sounds good, but like, we kind of need to see some draft classes before we like give him oh, well, he's not going to draft this type.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see it.
Like, the first year of the Joe Judge era was like, oh, we don't get anyone who has an injury history. And the next season is like, we're getting only guys who have injury histories. Whereas like, we crossed off a lot of guys in the 2021 free agency and draft. And it's like, that's not the way they went about this at all. But if it's round 3, pick 81, you haven't picked a receiver. If they take Pickens, like, I'm celebrating that pick.
Yeah. Yeah, because this was a guy that we did talk about in May. And I'm pretty sure by the time that we decided that we were going to talk about him, Bobby, in our way too early 2022 draft preview, we decided we were going to talk about him. He didn't tear his ACL.
No, he did tear his ACL before that, because I had it in my yellow way too early notes.
Well, but then by the time that we recorded it, he did tear his ACL. Like, yes. That's what I was thinking. So, okay. And he was being projected as one of the best wide receivers in the class. So if you can get him in the third round, and you're going to bet on traits, and you're going to bet on what he can do. So,
Yeah, and hopefully he's not a total troublemaker. Like he's nuts. He's insane. And I kind of gravitate towards insane people. Hence our Kadarius Toney conversation earlier. Mm-hmm. All right, let's hit the next guy on the list. And then you could do your ad. And the next guy on this list is someone I'm not going to fall in love with, but man, he's intriguing. And that's Calvin Austin, wide receiver out of Memphis. 5'8", 170 pounds. Those guys are rarely successful. But let's read some stuff off. 40 time, 4.32, fifth best in the entire NFL combine. His shuttle, 4.07, third best in the NFL combine. His three-cone drill, 6.65, fourth best in the entire NFL combine. His broad jump, second best in the NFL combine. His vertical jump was 39 inches, which was third best out of the wide receivers and was like eighth best in the entire combine. Put up a back-to-back 1,000-yard receiving seasons for Memphis. He's an excellent athlete in all areas, and we watched him down the Senior Bowl, and when you put him in one-on-one matchups where he looked the best out of there because it's like, okay, that's where what he does shines. He's got great speed matched with great get-off, but I do think he can be a one-speed player at times, but his cuts are instant, they're smooth, there's no slowdown. He can murder you on double routes, but he just needs to become a better football player. Like I think he needs to temper his pace for his zones. And let's address the elephant that's not very big in the room. He's small, and that size is a major issue, and it shows up. He's not going to win you any 50-50 balls. He really struggles with press, but if you do press him and he makes you pay, like he'll make you pay real bad. So that's the elephant in the room with a guy like Calvin Austin. It's like, how much are you going to bet on a guy who's 5'8", 170 pounds, and we just don't see that win. We don't see that win. We don't see guys with that light win in the NFL, and that was the Devontae Smith argument last year. Like, oh, those guys don't win; they're that light. But definitely guys that are that short and that light, like Calvin Austin. So again, he's going to have some amazing reps. He can have some game-changing plays. But here's my thing: I think Calvin Austin will be a guy who will last a long time in the NFL. But you'll look at it, and he has every year it's about like 17 catches. 320 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like I think that's the Calvin Austin career. So again, there's things to fall in love with him, but I'm not going to fall in love with him as a player.
Even John Ross is 5'11", 194, and Calvin Austin's 5'8", 170. Like I was thinking, let's try and compare John Ross here, and even simply just what John Ross did for the Giants in 2020, which was take the top off, have some really nice explosive plays. But then also, like, every time the ball was thrown to John Ross, like, I feel like something good happened where it was a first down and he created a lot of separation with comeback routes on the sideline. And that's really the only place where Jason Garrett wanted to throw the ball was near the sideline. So I thought maybe Calvin Austin could do that. But yeah, that's very, very light. But he's an ultra exciting player.
That bothers me more.
He's an ultra exciting player that I think people should get excited for. Will NFL teams get excited? I don't know, but one of the more exciting wide receivers, one of the more exciting day 3 players in the draft.
I think he'll have a long career because one, he has returner value too.
Yeah.
I think he's going to be in the NFL for a while. I don't think he's going to flame out of the NFL, but I just think at the end of the day, you're going to look at his stats, and every team that gets him is going to fall in love with him and in the off season, but it's just, you're going to look back at it and it's like most of those stats are just mediocre. And he'll add value to an NFL team, but I don't know if he's, again, and this is what we're doing. We're not all talking about top prospects, wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 guys. That's not what we try to do with these. But that height worries me. But at the same time, like, you get a guy who's just an unreal athlete and can just embarrass corners in the NFL.
Yeah. 5 receptions of 50-plus yards. I think I would rather have a guy like Calvin Austin versus a guy who is bigger, slower, not as athletic, and just can't do anything, though. Was that fair?
Yeah, and that's why we're talking, like, I see him as, like, late 3rd, early 4th,
Oh, I see him later. I see him day 3, 5th, 6th.
Yeah, I guess he probably will fall, but, like, there's a guy like Demetric Felton from last year who was a smaller guy, and Cleveland found some use out of him at UCLA. I like Calvin Austin way more than I like a guy like Felton.
Okay.
Who was that smaller frame, So, again, I don't know how great of a career he's going to have, but I do think he'll have good use in the NFL.
All right on.
All right, read the ad, and then we'll talk about Khalil Shakir.
All right. Who I love, by the way. Love Khalil Shakir.
I like him too, even though he's a bad athlete.
Yeah, a good football player. Love that little cliche phrase when somebody's a bad athlete. Today's episode is sponsored by SeatGeek. Live events are back, which means you can get $20 off tickets at SeatGeek with promo code GIANTS. Buying Charlotte tickets to Charlotte Motor Speedway, it's now called the Coke 600. I am using promo code GIANTS. I am going to SeatGeek. I'm buying 5 tickets. So you should be buying tickets with SeatGeek. If you're going to a baseball game, Met game, Yankee game, if you're going to Nets playoffs, you should be using SeatGeek. SeatGeek rates every ticket from 0 to 10 to make sure you are getting a good deal. Green means good, red means bad. Every ticket on SeatGeek is backed by their buyer guarantee, so you can shop for tickets with confidence. So, make sure you use code GIANTS, $20 off at SeatGeek. That's $20 off your first purchase with promo code GIANTS at SeatGeek. Make sure you click the link in the description to download the app.
How were the races this weekend?
Cold. That going to that Martinsville race, it was 35 degrees, windy. It was like attending a Giants game. It was a fun race, even though the race was bad. I just love going to NASCAR races. The race was bad. It was cold. Terrible experience, but I still had fun.
May 27th, Charlotte, North Carolina, Memorial Day weekend. Be there for our live show. Once the draft's over, I'm going to start promoting that like ruthlessly.
Oh, yeah, I'm going to start preparing for it. Yeah, I'm very excited for it.
All right, next on this list, and I thought we were like, hey, we're going to go under an hour. We're not going under an hour. Khalil Shakir, wide receiver out of Boise State. 6 foot, 196 pounds, 29-inch arms. That's not a good frame. Ran a 4.4 340, which isn't bad. Had a 34.5-inch vertical jump. Put up 1,100 yards for Boise State, but not great catch rates, but that also comes with QB. I think he's a shifty wide receiver who can work outside, but is mostly going to be a slot guy, and that's what he was at Boise State. Adequate NFL speed to me, but he's not going to run away from anyone. But that being said, he's very quick and sudden in his get-off, but he's just not going to test DBs, and he'll struggle to separate versus man coverage with his athleticism issues. But his route running is just beautiful, and he can work the entire route tree. He's just very polished. He flips his hips very quickly. When he's playing through zone, he tempers the speed really well. He works leverage. He sets up double moves. Like, I think he's just a really good wide receiver. He sets stuff up, nice stutter step and sell at the top of his stem. And you get him the ball in his hands, and he's like, you think, oh, not a great athlete. Like, he's very shifty after the catch and fights for every single yard. And it won't ever be a strength of him, but he can make some contested catches. And they use him in multiple ways. So, like, Khalil Shakir is like, man, like you said, like the cliche, just a good football player. I agree with it. Like, I don't think that's just a cliche for a guy who's got maybe not some great athleticism, but I do think Shakir is, again, we're talking about how deep wide receivers their class are. This guy's going to go, 3, 4, 5, somewhere in that range. But it's like, I think this guy could come in and produce, on his rookie contract and whatever fan base gets him is going to be excited about him. Yeah. 3 years from now.
The fan base is going to be excited because especially you turn on the highlight tape and there are some real wow plays with insane circus catches and yards after the catch plays. He has plus instincts to make guys miss, plus he's really solid at finding holes over the middle of the field. 14 missed tackles and 6 yards after the catch per reception this past year. I think he is a kind of player, Bobby, where he is relentless, and I think he makes up for not being a plus athlete with being relentless, and this is both in his route running and in yards after the catch.
Yeah.
And I think you kind of have to sometimes think of the game of football like a fight. Like you're boxing, right? Where we like to talk about defensive ends and tackles, how it's a dance and they're fighting throughout the entire game and somebody's going to wear down the other guy. And I almost think wide receiver and cornerbacks, it's almost the same thing, especially if you're facing the same guy over and over again. It's a fight. It's a dance. And you kind of have to wear down your partner. And I think Shakir is going to be that kind of guy where in the third and the fourth quarter, when things matter the most, he's going to wear down his guy by going 100%, every rep. Even if he's not a great athlete, he's going to wear him down. He's not going to take plays off. And then that'll be a big play that's going to wind up winning you the game in the fourth quarter. And that stuff, I feel like that really does matter. So he's a love it player for me. High motor, relentless player, like I said. Just a fun football player. Is it going to translate to the NFL? I don't know. You're probably going to need an offensive coordinator that's going to have some creativity to get him involved in certain ways. But fun football player, especially if we're talking about day 2, day 3.
And again, I don't think you even need too much credit. I think you throw him in the slot and let him do slot thing, where it's like it's not all about athleticism, where route running is that much more important, where reading zones and finding the holes and things and tempering your speed and understanding coverages means more. And supposedly, again, I hate reading this stuff and saying this, but like supposedly like he's like a great teammate, like really works hard type of guy, but that shows up in his play. So
yeah.
If someone said that about George Pickens, I'm like, I don't know if I believe that. With Shakir, it's like, okay, that makes sense with the way he plays. And I think he can just affect a football game with like doing all of those things not rightly. Who am I? Doing all those things right, without taking the top off of a field. Like is he gonna have 60-yard touchdowns? No, but I think he can be a consistent wide receiver in the slot, for a long time.
I agree.
Next on the list, a guy from our hometown. Rutgers. I love talking about Rutgers, guys. I'm a low-key Rutgers fan. I was very heavily invested in that Mike Teal, Ray Rice, and Brian Leonard team with Greg Schiano. And Schiano's back, and I kind of hate him because of the way he used Bo Milton. 5'11", 189 pounds. Really, I think if there's one player who's a riser through the Senior Bowl and then the Combine, it might be Bo Melton. Because at the Senior Bowl, he performed pretty well down there, and then he went to the Combine, ran a 4.3 440, 38-inch in vertical, 6.98 3-cone drill. The issue was he was the most frustrating wide receiver to watch on film, not because of him, because he was just so limited by the Rutgers offense. It was so run heavy. They ran over 50% of the time, and then there was just quick games like curl route, hitch route, speed out. It's like, man, this guy just doesn't get to run the route tree with the way this offense is run. But he does have real speed to test you downfield with just awesome get off, and he attacks leverage well, gets to the blind spot. So even when you are working those quick game things, Bo Melton does that really well. Now, his route running is definitely not great in my mind, but he does work the sidelines well. But I think his routes can be rounded off too much when he's working inside. His biggest flaw, he just doesn't have the size, or the ability to track well in contested situations. There's just time where it's like, man, this is just really bad ball tracking, even when it's not like a super contested, but like you have, corner in your hip. But it's like you just did a bad job tracking this ball, and the ball kind of comes into his chest, and he just doesn't snatch it out of the air. And he's a good leaper, but I think he missed times it as well. So this is definitely like, we talked about these last couple guys. It's like, oh, maybe, round 3, early round 4. I do view Melton as like a 5th, 6th, 7th type guy. Going into the Senior Bowl and the Combine, I probably had him as like a priority UDFA. But, the Combine doing well at the Senior Bowl, which I think does matter for a guy who was in that Rutgers system, matters. And now it's like, okay, this is a guy who's going to be drafted on day 3.
Yeah, and there are some people that have Bo Melton ranked very, very high because of they turned on the Rutgers film, and that's partially why he's risen in some draft boards. And he still is, Rutgers isn't a powerhouse, but he still is in like top 6, top 5 in some receiving categories. And this is a school that produced guys like Kenny Britt and Tyquan Underwood, who were NFL pros, for a little bit. So speed, you're going to bet on the traits. He's not Calvin Austin small, but he's not. He still is relatively small. So
he doesn't play big either,
4-year starter at Rutgers. I believe he was a captain last year, so maybe a 2-year captain at Rutgers.
Yeah, I've been following him for a couple of years.
11 drops the last 2 years combined, and had a case at the drops at the Senior Bowl a little bit, but it was also raining.
Yeah. He doesn't go and snatch the ball out of there. Like the ball, I've been saying a lot of suspect things on this podcast that you clip, but
I've been clipping him, yeah. Yeah,
I know. So I don't want to say this, but the ball, he doesn't grab it out of the air. It goes into his chest. I didn't want to say it comes into his chest.
Oh, there we go.
Rest in peace, Anthony used to say that all the time when we were doing film breakdowns together, and I clipped him like you every single time.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's a. This isn't like he's held back by Rutgers, totally held back by Rutgers. This guy's going to make the whole NFL look silly. No, like he can have NFL production, but also like there's limitations to his game.
Yeah, could be good value day 3.
How about that? Next on this list. This I think can be good value, but he is a very confusing player. Velus Jones Jr., wide receiver out of Tennessee. 6 foot, 204 pounds. Finishing off this guy. Ran a 4.31 40. Woo-wee! Played 5 years in college football. Why?
6.
Well, he was, technically 6 because he was a grad transfer from USC, and he'll be 25 when the season starts, and then he used the super senior year for COVID. Now, his numbers were severely harmed by just horrible QB play at Tennessee. Like, horrible QB play where it's like, I mean, there's times where when I say wide open, I'm not talking about like he's got 3 yards on the guy. He's wide open, and the QB would miss him up the seam. But so I don't look at his number, and his numbers aren't even bad, honestly. His past season at Tennessee, the years before that, he doesn't have production. Mostly work from the slot, but I think he can add, he can be dynamic from it. Where I don't think Khalil Shakir is dynamic, but I think he can be dynamic. Where it's like, hey, he's got great speed to get up the seams. He can split safeties if you put him in the right situation. Route running, again, he's gonna be 25, but it is a little inconsistent. But he has some really nice reps, and he's got great bursts out of his breaks. But also, I think Tennessee just had the route tree limited. I think it was more scheme than necessarily him. But man, you watch him, and he's just a fun watch. Like, he's very elusive after the catch. His contact balance, which is really good. Like, I think top of this class. Like, his just ability to move, like, catch the ball and make a move with it. And obviously, he had a lot of kick return experience at USC and Tennessee. He had 122 kick returns and 2 touchdowns between both schools. So he's going to be 25 when the season starts. I really do think if Velus Jones Jr. was 22, he'd be talked about a lot more. But he is 25, and you can't really ignore that. But I think you can get an exciting player in day 3.
Shows up all the time in mock drafts for the Giants. Like that sixth round pick that we got shows up all the time there.
Yeah. And I did prep on him going into Mobile, and I was like, I kind of like this guy. And then in Mobile, it's like, man, he looked at the best wide receiver at times. Working on the outside, was beating guys deep. Like he performed really well down there, and like Bo Melton, it's like, okay, it's nice to see this guy without just having to throw little quick screens, because that's what Tennessee did with him a lot, because they knew he was a talent and used him, because their quarterback couldn't throw the ball accurately even 15 yards down the field. Like, if you just put him with an average QB, he probably has 1,300 yards this past season.
Yeah. I think if he is going to make a roster, though, and I can easily see this, and we haven't said this a lot. Very proud of us, patting ourselves on the back, because we have not said this a lot during our draft previews. He's going to make it on special teams. We have not mentioned special teams as part of our player evaluations this year, and I'm very proud of that. But I'm using it for the first time this time.
How about that? We done did it.
We are an anti-special teams podcast.
Yeah. But I don't think even counting a guy as a returner is talking about special teams value. Like, people that mention like that, the annoying bringing up special teams is like a linebacker,
gunner.
Gary Brightwell, guy adds a lot of special team value. It's like, really? Name me one Gary Brightwell special teams played at Arizona. It's like you literally can't find those.
Tough.
Like they don't put them together. So don't tell me how great Gary Brightwell is at special teams. You just don't know that.
YouTube highlight videos of special teams plays. Should we start doing that? Should we start clipping up special teams plays? I think we should not hire. I think we should just find somebody who's such a miserable person that would want to just go through special teams plays and then make highlight plays of those.
Honestly, it's a market that is there to be taken, but we're not going to take it.
Do people just talk about special teams, but they actually don't know anything about it or actually like it?
Exactly, all the time. Special teams conversations are nauseating because, one, people don't know what they're talking about, and two, it's like, you don't watch special teams. You don't, and then sometimes certain people will talk about special teams to make them see like, oh, I actually pay attention to all 3 phases of the game.
Like, hearing Joe Judge talk about special teams in those, like, Patriots Life videos that they did, like, after they won Super Bowls and stuff like that, how I think he was actually at Rutgers, and talking about the punter. I like to think that I know football, but then I hear somebody who actually knows what they're talking about. They talk about special teams. I'm like, I don't know anything. I know literally zero.
Brutal. And I always skip through the special teams portion of the Joe Judge segment. People in 2020, they're like, oh, you're a loser for doing that. And then in 2021, all of a sudden, people don't care about the Joe Judge report. All right, we appreciate you guys. This guy's an idiot. All right, we'll see you guys on Friday. We're talking about DBs, right?
I believe so. DBs and safeties?
Yeah, cornerbacks. Well, safeties are DBs. Cornerbacks and safeties. Usually I'm not looking forward to this episode, but I actually am. There's a lot of DBs in this class I like talking about.
This is stacked.
I love talking about Ahmad Gardner.
You can make an argument that cornerbacks and safeties should be two separate episodes, but they're not.
All right, we appreciate you guys. We'll see you on Friday. Until then, let's go Big Blue.